Hey guys, it's Evan. My vlog was rudely interrupted. So today's Sunday, August 23rd. It's 9:10. I'm going to call it here in a bit because it is late at night. But I want to. Well, one, I think it's super weird. I was talking about like being baptized in honor of like my family and where we come from, and I think that, well, I've always seen Hernan Cortez or Hernando Cortez. I've always seen like textbook pictures of him, but I've never really noticed the color of his eyes. And oddly, like I was kind of like taken away by the color of his eyes because it's like super, super, super rare that I ever see anybody with the same eye color as me. And that's weird. But, anyways, so Hernan Cortez was the first Marquis of the Valley of Oaxaca. He was a Spanish conquistador, military commander, and that is the lineage of my grandfather's crest. So my grandfather comes from the Cortez family, and he was the explorer, captain general, and writer who led an expedition that caused the fall of the Aztec Empire and brought large portions of what is now mainland Mexico under the rule of the King of Castile in the early 16th century. Cortez was part of the generation of Spanish explorers and conquistadors who began the first phase of the Spanish colonization of the Americas. He was born in Medellin, Spain, to a family of lesser nobility. Cortez chose to pursue adventure and riches in the New World. He went to Hispaniola and later to Cuba, where he received an encomienda, which is the right to the labor of certain subjects. A lot of my heritage or my roots actually comes from Afro-Cuba descent. So I guess that kind of makes sense.
Alert from messages. Country code 17134.
I have a lot of Afro-Latino in my roots. I have a lot of indigenous Native America and indigenous African roots. And so this makes sense as to why, because Hernando Cortez basically conquered parts of mainlands Africa, Hispaniola, and Cuba. And for a short time, he served as alcalde, which is a magistrate. I think in different dialects modern day, people say alcalde as a mayor, but that's not the reality. The reality in traditional Spanish form, alcalde is a magistrate of the second Spanish town founded on the island. In 1519, he was elected captain of the third expedition to the mainland, which he partly funded. His enmity with the governor of Cuba, Diego Velázquez de Cuellar, resulted in the recall of the expedition at the last moment, an order which Cortes ignored. Arriving on the continent, Cortes executed a successful strategy of allying with some indigenous people against others. He also used a native woman, Doña Marina, as an interpreter. She later gave birth to his first son. When the governor of Cuba sent emissaries to arrest Cortes, he fought them and won. Using the extra troops as reinforcements, Cortes wrote letters directly to the king, asking to be acknowledged for his successes. Instead of being punished for mutiny, after he overthrew the Aztec Empire, Cortes was awarded the title of Marquis de Valle de Oaxaca. So that's basically the magistrate of the Valley of Oaxaca. While the more prestigious title of Viceroy was given to a high ranking nobleman, Antonio de Mendoza. And in 1541, Cortes returned to Spain, where he died 6 years later of natural causes. Name. In his known writings, Cortes always referred to himself as Hernando Cortes. Until the 20th century, most writers continued to spell his first name as Hernando or the equivalent Fernando, William H. Prescott, Conquest of Mexico, 1843, for instance, referred to him as Hernando Cortez. However, in the 20th century, the conventional spelling was gradually shifted, the shortened form of Hernan. Most modern biographies and encyclopedias now refer to him as Hernan. His physical appearance, in addition to the illustration by the German artist Christoph Weiditz in his Trachtenbuch, there are three known portraits of Hernan Cortes, which were likely made in his lifetime, though only copies of them have survived. All of these portraits show Cortes in the later years of his life. The account of the conquest of the Aztec Empire, written by Bernal Diaz del Castillo, gives a detailed description of Hernan Cortes's physical appearance. He was of good stature and body, well proportioned and stocky. The color of his face was somewhat gray, not very cheerful, and a longer face would have suited him more. His eyes seemed at times loving and at times grave and serious. His beard was black and sparse, as was his hair, which at the time he sported in the same way as his beard. He had a high chest, a well shaped back, and was lean with little belly. Bernal Diaz de Castillo. Seems to describe me pretty well at this, to be honest with you. Cortes was born around 1485 in the town of Medellin, Extremadura, a poor and desolate province of the Kingdom of Castile. His father was Martin Cortes, an hidalgo of distinguished ancestry but slender means. Bartolome de las Casas, who knew Cortes's father, wrote that he was a very poor and humble squire. Although an old Christian and they say nobleman, his mother was Catalina Pizarro, though through her mother, Leonor Sanchez Pizarro, Hernan was a distant relation to Francisco Pizarro. That was actually my grandfather's great grandfather's name, Francisco, the conqueror of the Inca Empire. My great, my grandfather's great great grandfather, my grandfather's, yes, great grandfather, his side of the family had a lot of Francisco, the conqueror of the Inca Empire. From, I want to say from his, yes, I think so, from his dad's side still. No, Cortez comes from his mom, so it's from his mom's side. Yeah, it's from my grandfather's mom's side. That's where my grandfather gets Cortez from. My grandmother, she was Spanish. My great, basically my grandmother. So, mm, according to his biographer and chaplain Francisco Lopez de Gomara, Cortez was pale and sickly as a child. At the age of 14, he was sent to study Latin under an uncle in Salamanca. Later historians have misconstrued this personal tutoring as time spent enrolled at the University of Salamanca. After 2 years, Cortes returned home to Medellin, much to the irritation of his parents, who had hoped to see him equipped for a profitable legal career. However, those 2 years in Salamanca, plus his long period of training and experience as a notary, first in Valladolid and later in Hispaniola, gave him knowledge of the legal codes of Castile that he applied to help justify his unauthorized conquest of Mexico. I hate school, so I'm just gonna go conquer a whole country. Made him go to school for 2 years and he conquered two continents. Sounds like me. At this point in his life, Cortes was described by Gomorrah as ruthless, haughty, and mischievous. The 16-year-old youth had returned home to feel constrained. Imagine being 16 and conquering all of the New World at just the age of 16. Unreal. Had returned home to feel constrained by life in his small provincial town. By this time, news of the exciting discoveries of Christopher Columbus in the New World was streaming back to Spain. Early career in the New World. Plans were made for Cortes to sail to the Americas with a family acquaintance and distant relative, Nicolas de Ovando. the newly appointed governor of Hispaniola. This island is now divided between Haiti and the Dominican Republic. Cortes suffered an injury and was prevented from traveling. He spent the next year wandering the country, probably spending most of his time in Spain's southern ports of Cadiz, Palos, Sanlúcar, and Seville. He finally left for Hispaniola in 1504 and became a colonist. Okay, that was his arrival. Cuba. In 1511, Cortes accompanied Diego Velázquez de Cuellar, an aide of the governor of Hispaniola, in his expedition to conquer Cuba. Afterwards, Velázquez was appointed governor of Cuba. At the age of 26, Cortes was made clerk to the treasurer, with the responsibility of ensuring that the crown received the quinto, or the customary one-fifth of profits from the expedition. Well, from what I know, eventually these increments become how modern day we have the increments for coins. So, let's see. Apparently, between him and this Velasquez guy, the relationship became strained. I guess because he was pretty smart. It says Velasquez was so impressed with Cortes that he secured a high political position for him in the colony. He became secretary for Governor Velasquez. Cortes was twice appointed municipal magistrate of Santiago. In Cuba, Cortes became a man of substance with an encomienda to provide Indian labor for his mines and cattle. The new position of power also made him the new source of leadership, which opposing forces in the colony could then turn to. In 1514, Cortes led a group which demanded that more Indians be assigned to the settlers. As time went on, the relations between Cortes and Velasquez became strained. Cortes found time to become romantically involved with Catalina Suarez, which is interesting because my great grandmother, some of her names, like her name comes from those. My great grandmother's name is, I guess, a descendant of these types of names. Mm-hmm. In 1518, Velasquez put Cortes in command of an expedition to explore and secure the interior of Mexico for colonization, probably because that was not an easy thing to do at all. Probably thought some would be dead, so he didn't like him. He probably put him there. It says at the last minute, due to the old argument between the two, Velasquez changed his mind and revoked Cortes's charter. Cortes ignored the orders and, in act of open mutiny, went anyway. In February 1519, he stopped in Trinidad, Cuba to hire more soldiers and obtain more horses. Accompanied by 11 ships, 500 men, including seasoned slaves, i.e., enslaved people who had on Hispaniola become accustomed to climate, foods, and diseases of post 1492 America, where the weakest among them died off. 13 horses and a small number of cannon, Cortes landed on the Yucatan Peninsula in Maya territory. So a lot of this is factually what my blood, if you look at my bloodline, it's literally factually pretty accurate with this. And so many people, they don't understand the Afro Latino community and they don't understand what Afro Latinos are. And this is why and how Afro Latinos came to be. Like, Afro Latinos are truth of the entire conquest of the Americas. And I know that's super, super difficult to understand, but it's true. Like, this was Cortez's strategy. Most people, especially Christopher Columbus, was abusing the American indigenous people. And Cortez had a different view. You know, he didn't want to, I mean, although he was not the greatest or the nicest person, he did not want to be like Christopher Columbus. He had learned already from his power that he obtained in Cuba. He learned basically how to obtain wealth and create a wealthy community. And in order for him to do that and expand on that, since he wasn't being given the power or any more assistance from his friend or whatever, was that he made a pit stop in Trinidad in Cuba to get horses and give the enslaved people, as awful as it sounds, give the enslaved people an opportunity to help, you know, in this excursion. I mean, the Haitian people back then, and even the modern day Haitian people suffer. They they are highly heavily abused in these countries. And imagine in 1518, so he landed on the Yucatan in the peninsula in the Maya territory. So you get this blend of Spanish, Haitian, Trinidadian, African enslaved people that ultimately end up on the peninsula in Maya territory. There he encountered Geronimo de Aguilar, a Spanish Franciscan priest who had survived a shipwreck, followed by a period in captivity with the Maya before escaping. It says Aguilar had learned the Chontal Maya language and was able to translate for Cortez. Chontal Maya language is very difficult. Modern day Mexicans that have some idea of Chontal Maya language, their idea of Chontal Maya language is a Coca Cola bottle in an indigenous witch medicine, which is a little hot. And oftentimes you don't know what this little medicine witch is saying at all, but you know that she has like 20 cases of empty glass bottle cokes and shrines of Coca-Cola bottles. And I know that sounds super weird, but the raw sugar cane in Coca-Cola is viewed as a medicine in these parts of indigenous places in Mexico. I know that sounds super strange, but I can't make this stuff up. And that language, even the dialogues in those languages are, I couldn't tell you, you know, I probably could tell you more about some of their rituals, but outside of that, I can probably tell you more about spiritual rituals and the language. I wouldn't say it's super difficult, as it's like practically non-existent, and even among those indigenous people now, it's fading. It's like not really there, and it's one of those languages, like most languages, have lived through times and expanded, and people still use bits and pieces. Like even in Texas, people speaking Spanglish, but this type of Spanish is it's not really even a Spanish. It's an indigenous language that just didn't really withstand the test of time at all, and uh, it's it's not. I would say most of those people now that speak that language are very artisanal. Like they make very old textile crafts, fabrics, pottery, things like that. But outside of that, it's going to be super hard. He received 20 young indigenous women from the vanquished natives and he converted them all to Christianity. Among these women was La Malinche, who was his future mistress and the mother of his son Martin. Malinche knew both the Waqti language and the Chontal Maya language, enabling Cortes to communicate with the Aztecs through Aguilar. Nahuatl language is probably more common language that most people speak compared to Chantal Maya. I would say the Nahuatl language is more common. Nahuatl is Hispanicized from Nahuatl. Nahuatl is Aztec or Mexicano, and it is a language by some definitions a group of languages of the Uto-Aztecan language families. Varieties of Nahuatl are spoken by about 1.7 million Nahuas, most of whom live mainly in central Mexico. So basically, that is why even modern day, like now, even I saw this documentary about Eva Longoria where she goes to the capital de F, or how do they say in America, Mexico City, and historically present modern day people culturally to say you are tú eres chilango, like you are a chilango, has never been a like in a like a positive remark or a comment. It's been a like an insult, and a lot of it has to do with this Spanish culture. And because so to say somebody was chilango wasn't really truly what was said. It was more like eres una fresa. So these are like people that are from like the FA mostly, or from Mexico City, or they say El Capital or the capital. So these are people that have never really grasped the concept of the Spanish language or the Mexican language. They kind of formed like their own dialect, which their own way of talking, which they say eres una niña fresa, or eres niño fresa, or fresa, like eres una fresa, or eres chilango. So these are people that are always just like o sea, or people that don't really know how to speak proper Spanish or formal Spanish is why they would make these remarks about them. As opposed to in Monterey, most people in Monterey are like super, super, super. They call everybody that has like, and even then, there's a lot of discrimination in Monterey. Like, you can be from Monterey and you can be from the central heart of Monterey, and you be still considered lower class. But if you are from Nuevo Leon and you're from particular parts of Nuevo Leon, culturally certain spots, and these spots are more, if you know the history of Nuevo Leon, Mexico, and you know the layout and the topography of the mountains and the terrain, each road block, it's not like Los Angeles or California or certain parts of America where, like, even in Houston, you have like allegedly like little Mexico or barrios and stuff like that. That's very Americanized. In Mexico, it's not like how you see on TV where they're like, oh, this is like barrio stuff. No. Mexico, it's kind of raunchy to say a barrio. In Mexico, each road is, especially in Monterrey, each road and each colony, that's what they're called, colonies. They're not called barrios, they're called colonies because that's what they were. But each road is named after a date in history that it was conquest conquested. So if it's like a certain day in February, that would be the name. Like it'd be like 12 de abril, 5 de febrero. These are all historical dates of when these neighborhoods or this land was conquested and taken over. And ultimately, all of these little streets and the dates that they were taken over, the conquest was, you know, they're named after historical dates. The streets, like in America, you have roads named after historical figures, or even cities like Austin, Texas, named after historical people. And you don't have that. I mean, I'm sure there are places in Mexico, but like it's not like you have Cortez, Mexico. You have all of the dates and times and dates of when Cortez and other people, historical figures, conquested Mexico. And ultimately, when they started to revolutionize and conquer these little tiny little streets, roads, mountains, these territories, they became a colony. So that's why where my family comes from, it is called La Colonia Independencia. That means it was one of the very first colonies that was ever independent in the state of Mexico. And so that's why these people consider themselves royalty. Everybody else was not considered royalty because they were not liberated, they were not independent people. So, yeah, tough times to live in, that's for sure. It says here many chronicles, grammars, works of poetry, documents, codices were written in Naudal. Let's see if it actually goes to modern day stuff. This is the history. It basically kind of describes more professionally what I said. Given the process of marginalization combined with the trend of migration to urban areas into the United States, some linguists are warning of impending language death. That's basically what I said. Just a lot of these languages never survived the test of time. Mm, At present, Nahuatl is mostly spoken in rural areas by an impoverished class of indigenous subsistence of agriculturalists. So that's kind of where I guess those insults of like you are this type of way, kind of like mimicking. I guess it's like an endearing term, but really it's not an endearing term. It says as a whole, now Deal is considered to be an endangered language. However, during the late 20th century, several now Deal dialects became extinct. One of my cousins actually has this type of, I guess, lineage in their bloodline, Zapatista. So the Zapatista Army of National Liberation, they were a different, how do you say, they were the southernmost state of Mexico. One of my cousin comes from this, he comes from the Zapata bloodline, but these people had a lot of problems. These people were very just brutalized for their territory because they were the southern, because of where they geographically were located. And I think because of that, they really, really have never It says even here, Marcos made a speech on behalf of the Zapatistas. And this is where the Palestinian and Israeli community come in heavily. A lot of Arabic languages and everything starts to come through the southern portion of Mexico. A lot of Haitian people, a lot of immigrants. I even saw, there's a lot of Japanese, Asian culture. A lot of immigrants towards this time frame in the early 20th century began to migrate through Mexico and 2010. So it even says right here, I think I scrolled too fast, but I think I scrolled way too fast here. Let's see if I can find it. So it says here the 1990s. I'm going to fast forward through a lot of this. That's still how you say it. The INA INALI, which is Instituto Nacional de Lenguas Indígenas, it says that they took on the responsibility, I guess the role of protecting indigenous community languages. In particular, the federal La Ley General de Derechos Lingüísticos de los Pueblos Indígenas, which is the general law on the language rights of the indigenous peoples, promulgated 13 March 2003, recognizes all the country's indigenous languages, including Nahuatl, as national languages and gives indigenous people the right to use them in all spheres of public and private life. In Article 11, it grants access to compulsory intercultural bilingual education. Nonetheless, progress towards institutionalizing Nahuatl and securing linguistic rights for its speakers has been slow. That's crazy. Right? Okay, back to my great, whoever this man is to me. It says on Easter Sunday of 1519, Cortez met Moctezuma II. There is a lot of stories about Moctezuma. Moctezuma allegedly, I think there's one story that's widely known because it is on the Topo Chico mineral water box. I'll dig into that in a minute. But apparently, Cortez met Moctezuma II's Aztec Empire governors, Tendile and Iquique. In 1519, his men took over Veracruz. Why does that not surprise me? By this act, Cortez dismissed the authority of the governor of Cuba to place himself directly under the orders of King Charles. Well, maybe this is why I have little man syndrome. To eliminate any ideas of retreat, Cortez scuttled his ships. There is, I could be mistaken, but I'm looking at this statue. There is, I believe, one just like this, kind of resembling this in Monterrey. Did it say anything about Monterrey here? So this is a statue. It's a monument to Hernan Cortez in Medellin. I don't know if it says anything about him in Monterrey just yet. I don't think Monterrey is really established here. Monterrey doesn't get established until later down the road. They show these images of Cristobal de Olid, who leads the Spanish soldiers to Tlacan, allies of conquest of Jalisco. And Jalisco is still like, this is nothing to Cortez. Jalisco, these little tiny territories are nothing to him. Let's see. I'm gonna fast forward through a lot of this stuff because these are just tiny little territories he's going through. Cortez encountered Cortez countered a conspiracy against him, headed by Antonio de Villafana, who was hanged for the offense. Somebody tried to wipe out Cortez, and Cortez said, "Not today." And it seems like Cortez won that situation because Villafana was hanged for trying to conspire against Cortez. Finally, with the capture of Cuauhtemoc, the Laudani ruler of Tenochtitlan, on 13 August 1521, the Mexico was conquered and Cortez was able to claim it for Spain, thus renaming the city Mexico City. Mesoamerica would be used for colonization of Americas, including methods of slavery and ethnic cleansing from 1521 to 1524. Cortez personally governed Mexico. I'm telling you. Okay, let's see. Cortez personally was not ungenerously rewarded, but he steadily complained of insufficient compensation to himself and his comrades. Thinking himself beyond the reach of restraint, he disobeyed many of the orders of the crown, and what was more imprudent, said so in a letter to the emperor dated October 15, 1524, to Yaxbalceta, Documentos para la Historia de Mexico, Mexico 1858 first. In this letter, Cortez, besides recalling in a rather abrupt manner that the conquest of Mexico was due to him alone, deliberately acknowledges his disobedience in terms which could not fail to create a most unfavorable impression. King Charles appointed Cortez as governor. Cortez was one bad dude, but they loved him. You know, he did things. I think it was all in the form of his writing. I mean, he was an author. He wrote his own accomplishments and his own entitlements. He wrote meticulously what he had accomplished and what he was entitled to because he accomplished and he conquered it. And vanity may have played a part in his deteriorating position with the king. But even so, King Charles still appointed Cortez as governor, captain general, and chief justice of the newly conquered territory, dubbed New Spain of the Ocean Sea. But also, much to the dismay of Cortez, four royal officials were appointed at the same time to assist him in his government. In effect, submitting him to close observation and administration, Cortez initiated the construction of Mexico City, destroying Aztec temples and buildings and then rebuilding on the Aztec ruins what soon became the most important European city in the Americas. Like I said about his early on feats when he was a teenager, this is kind of what I said in the beginning. Cortez managed the founding of the new cities and appointed men to extend Spanish rule to all of New Spain, imposing the encomienda system in 1524. So encomiendas were rewards for their accomplishments in conquering central Mexico. Mm, I'm starving. The coat of arms award to Cortez by King Carlos I of Spain. Charles. That's funny. The death of his first wife, Zuniga, sculpture of Juana de Zuniga, a second wife of Cortez. Cortez's wife, Catalina Suarez, arrived in Spain. Let's see. Doña Marina. Catalina Suarez died under mysterious circumstances the night of 1st or 2nd November. There were accusations at the time that Cortez had murdered his wife. There was an investigation into her death and reviewing a variety of household residents. There was a scandal, but Cortez was free to marry someone of high status more appropriate to his wealth and power. In 1529, he had been accorded the noble designation of Don, but most importantly, was given the noble title of Marquis of the Valley. So that is how formally where I come from, where you are addressed. So, like me, I would be Don Ivan. He would be Don Hernando. Like this guy, he's known as Don Martin Cortez. His first son was Don Martin Cortez. He was Cortez's heir. I would be interested to read this tomorrow, but it talks a lot about Cortez's spiritual conquest of the Aztec Empire, and it talks a lot about this blend of conversion of the Caribbean islands, Spanish religion, and the Franciscan and Dominican friars, the Spanish monarch, and that is truly the truth of like this entire blend of the islands and the land through Mexico. Mm, the German history, the French history, the Spanish history, the Haitian history. Just let's see. Mexico was the epicenter of all these conquests before Ellis Island and whatever the other island is. Let's see. There were Holy Romans, there were French, there were German Protestants, there were Ottomans, Ottoman empires. Mm, this is where you get all these leones that come in, and ultimately that's where you get the name Nuevo Leon, which is the new, basically like the new powers. Let's see, another Leon, Ponce de Leon. Who was the other Leon? It was Luis Ponce de Leon, and then let's see, this guy has like a million pages. Life and Death Expedition. Whoa, this is an interesting fact. Taxa named after Cortez. So Cortez is commemorated in the scientific name of a subspecies of Mexican lizard, the Phrynosoma orbiculare cortesi. That's weird, huh? That's pretty cool, actually. Let's check it out. Whoa, this looks like a lizard that you don't want to mess with. That's so strange. Talk about psychology working itself out in the 18th century. Beyond that, really, because he's was born in when? He was born in 1526, 15th century. That's why I thought it was so cool that baptizing myself for them because my ancestry is 15th century and like this girl at church, little girl at church said that she saw 1700, 1800. Well, my lineage goes. This is the greatest guy, one of the greatest guys on the planet. Without him, we really wouldn't have the Americas. These Aztec ruins soon became the most important European city in the Americas. So Christopher Columbus ain't got nothing on this. Okay, but what I was talking about was the year that I was born. The Bank of Spain published a 1,000 Spanish peseta note issued in 1992 with Hernando Cortez on it. This sentence says the scarcity of sources has led to a sharp division in the description of Cortez's personality, and a tendency to describe him as either a vicious and ruthless person or a noble and honorable cavalier. It says one of the or some of the accounts, there's accusations and accounts of Cortez and stuff. Indian accusations, violence towards Indians. But the accounts of the conquest given in the Florentine Codex by the Franciscan Bernardino de Sahagún and his native, which is interesting because that name Sahagún is interesting because my great grandmother comes from this Andalusian bloodline, Moroccan bloodline, French bloodline, and one of her maiden name was Gaucin. So she was Josefina Gaucin Hernandez. She got Hernandez from my great grandfather, but she is Gaucin. So she's Josefina Gaucin, and this is a similar name. It says, and his native informants are also less than flattering towards Cortez. Representations in Mexico, he's all over the place. Let's see. Check out the tree. He has children that were born out of wedlock in Cuba, New Spain, different parts of Mexico, different territories of Mexico, and the Aztec and the Mayan. Okay, here we go. This is where one of those stories comes in. He allegedly had a child with Leonor Cortez, named. So even though she was an Aztec princess, I guess he made a way so that the Pope or whomever designated his Aztec daughter to be given the title of Doña. So she was titled Doña Leonor Cortez Moctezuma. She was born in Ciudad, Mexico, and the daughter of Aztec princess Techupotzin, baptized Isabel. That's just about everything. Now I want to go back to the story of Moctezuma because I think most people know Moctezuma. So Cortez met Moctezuma II. Hmm. Most people talk about his. I'm almost positive most people only know the story about his daughter. But hold on. So I just want to just before I close off, most people they just only know the story of like the mineral water about whatever they say about this princess or whatever. Mm, I'm almost positive it's him. But so water in these aqueducts were built in 1506, and these aqueducts were from Chapultepec to Tenochtitlan and Tlatelolco. This water was driven to the merchant ports of the city for people to drink and to the temples. This aqueduct was destroyed less than a year after Moctezuma's death during the siege of Tenochtitlan in 1521. Hmm. It says the Aztecs believed the Spaniards to be gods, and Cortez to be the returned god Quetzalcoatl. The veracity of this claim is difficult to ascertain. You have graciously come on earth, you have graciously approached your water, your high place of Mexico. You have come down to your mat, your throne, which I have briefly kept for you, I who used to keep it for you, and you have graciously arrived. You have known pain, you have known weariness. Now come on earth, take your rest, enter into your palace, rest your limbs. May our lords come on earth. All right, peace out.